Irish Fairy Tales. Chapter 44. This version of the death of Yule is not correct. Also Nocha is not in Lachlan but in Ireland. The wonderful gift-giving of Gall continued and an uneasiness and embarrassment began to creep through the great banqueting hall. Gentlemen looked at each other questioningly and then spoke again on indifferent matters but only with half of their minds. The singers, the harpers, and jugglers submitted to that constraint so that every person felt awkward and no one knew what should be done or what would happen, and from that doubt dullness came, with silence following on its heels. There is nothing more terrible than silence. Shame grows in that blank, or anger gathers there, and we must choose which of these is to be our master. That choice lay before Finn, who never knew shame. "Gall," said he, "how long have you been taking tribute from the people of Lachlan?" "A long time now," said Gall. And he looked into an eye that was stern and unfriendly. "I thought that my rent was the only one those people had to pay," Finn continued. "Your memory is at fault," said Gall. "Let it be so," said Finn. "How did your tribute arise?" "Long ago, Finn, in the days when your father forced war on me." "Ah," said Finn, "when he raised the High King against me and banished me from Ireland." "Continue," said Finn, and he held Gall's eye under the great beetle of his brow. "I went into Britain," said Gall, "and your father followed me there. I went into White Lachlan, Norway, and took it. Your father banished me thence also." "I know it," said Finn. "I went into the land of the Saxons, and your father chased me out of that land. And then, in Lachlan, at the battle of Nocha, your father and I met at last, foot to foot, eye to eye, and there, Finn." "And there, Gall?" "And there I killed your father." Finn sat rigid and unmoving, his face stony and terrible as the face of a monument carved on the side of a cliff. "Tell all your tale," said he. "At that battle I beat the Lachlanax. I penetrated to the hold of the Danish king, and I took out of his dungeon the men who had lain there for a year and were awaiting their deaths. I liberated 15 prisoners, and one of them was Finn." "It is true," said Finn. Gall's anger fled at the word. "Do not be jealous of me, dear heart, for if I had twice the tribute I would give it to you and to Ireland." But at the word jealous the chief's anger revived. "It is an impertinence," he cried, "to boast at this table that you killed my father." "By my hand," Gall replied, "if Finn were to treat me as his father did, I would treat Finn the way I treated Finn's father." Finn closed his eyes and beat away the anger that was rising within him. He smiled grimly. "If I were so minded, I would not let that last word go with you, Gall, for I have here 100 men for every man of yours." Gall laughed aloud. "So had your father," he said. Finn's brother, Carol Whiteskin, broke into the conversation with a harsh laugh. "How many of Finn's household has the wonderful Gall put down?" he cried. But Gall's brother, bald Conan the swearer, turned a savage eye on Carol. "By my weapons," said he, "there were never less than 101 men with Gall, and the least of them could have put you down easily enough." "Ah," cried Carol. "And are you one of the 101, old scaldhead?" "One indeed, my thick-witted, thin-livered Carol, and I undertake to prove on your hide that what my brother said was true and that what your brother said was false." "You undertake that," growled Carol, and on the word he loosed a furious buffet at Conan, which Conan returned with a fist so big that every part of Carol's face was hit with the one blow. The two then fell into grips and went lurching and punching about the great hall. Two of Oscar's sons could not bear to see their uncle being worsted, and they leaped at Conan, and two of Gall's sons rushed at them. Then Oscar himself leaped up, and with a hammer in either hand he went battering into the melee. "I thank the gods," said Conan, "for the chance of killing yourself, Oscar." These two encountered then, and Oscar knocked a groan of distress out of Conan. He looked appealingly at his brother Art Og MacMorna, and that powerful champion flew to his aid and wounded Oscar. Oisien, Oscar's father, could not abide that. He dashed in and quelled Art Og. Then rough hair MacMorna wounded Oisien and was himself tumbled by MacLugak, who was again wounded by Gara MacMorna. The banqueting hall was in tumult. In every part of it men were giving and taking blows. Here two champions with their arms round each other's necks were stamping round and round in a slow, sad dance. Here were two crouching against each other, looking for a soft place to hit. Yonder a big-shouldered person lifted another man in his arms and threw him at a small group that charged him. In a retired corner a gentleman stood in a thoughtful attitude while he tried to pull out a tooth that had been knocked loose. "You can't fight," he mumbled, "with a loose shoe or a loose tooth. Hurry up with that tooth," the man in front of him grumbled, "for I want to knock out another one." Pressed against the wall was a bevy of ladies, some of whom were screaming and some laughing, and all of whom were calling on the men to go back to their seats. Only two people remained seated in the hall. Gall sat twisted round watching the progress of the brawl critically, and Finn, sitting opposite, watched Gall. Just then Phelan, another of Finn's sons, stormed the hall with 300 of the Fianna, and by this force all Gal's people were put out of doors, where the fight continued. Gal looked then calmly on Finn. "Your people are using their weapons," said he. "Are they?" Finn inquired as calmly and as though addressing the air. "In the matter of weapons," said Gal. And the hard-fighting pillar of battle turned to where his arms hung on the wall behind him. He took his solid, well-balanced sword in his fist, over his left arm his ample, bossy shield, and with another side look at Finn he left the hall and charged irresistibly into the fray. Finn then arose. He took his accoutrements from the wall also and strode out. Then he raised the triumphant Fenian shout and went into the combat. That was no place for a sick person to be. It was not the corner which a slender-fingered woman would choose to do up her hair, nor was it the spot an ancient man would select to think quietly in, for the tumult of sword on sword, of axe on shield, the roar of the contending parties. The crying of wounded men and the screaming of frightened women destroyed peace, and over all was the rallying cry of Gal Mac Morna and the great shout of Finn. Then Fergus True Lips gathered about him all the poets of the Fianna, and they surrounded the combatants. They began to chant and intone long, heavy rhymes and incantations until the rhythmic beating of their voices covered even the noise of war, so that the men stopped hacking and hewing and let their weapons drop from their hands. These were picked up by the poets, and a reconciliation was effected between the two parties. But Finn affirmed that he would make no peace with Clan Morna until the matter had been judged by the king, Cormac Mac Art, and by his daughter Aelv, and by his son Cairbrae of Anna Life, and by Finn and the chief poet. Gal agreed that the affair should be submitted to that court, and a day was appointed, a fortnight from that date, to meet at Tara of the Kings for judgment. Then the hall was cleansed and the banquet recommenced. Of Finn's people 1,100 of men and women were dead, while of Gal's people 11 men and 50 women were dead. But it was through fright the women died, for not one of them had a wound or a bruise or a mark.